In a vast wasteland of entertainment where radio has become obsolete, stands an embittered man teetering at the edge of sanity. With help from radio friends, he's about to embark on a global mission that would change the course of history as we know it. Broadcasting live from the secret studios on the banks of the Brandywine River in Delaware is Mitchell K.C. Hill. And up to the Great White North in Vancouver is Alexander Knight.
And we don't have an alpha channel. Uh-oh. Should we start it over again? All right, just do a switch over, and I'll pop in the screen, say hi. And we only had a week to try that out before that happened. Anyhow, it's good to be here on the Last Angry DJ. This is episode number 54. And before we get the program started, we do this nonsense in North America called Daylight Savings Time. And just for you folks that want to know what the heck is it and why is it important, I have a public service announcement here for you. So if you stand by and listen up.
Everybody, listen carefully.
The Last Angry DJ has a timely reminder. Don't forget to set your clock forward 1 hour Sunday. Now you can get one less hour of sleep.
It'll just take 5 minutes. What do you say?
You're welcome.
It's about frickin' time.
Remember, fall back and spring forward.
And that is our public service announcement about this crazy daylight savings time. I don't know why we still do it here. I don't know if it's that way in Canada. Alex, please give us your opinion of daylight savings time and why we have to suffer. I guess you guys do it because we do it over here. Is that true?
Something, pick one time that we're going to do that and just stick with it. It drives me crazy. But I'm not here to talk about how much I hate daylight savings time.
Yes,
I'm here
you are.
to talk about the Last Angry DJ. So thanks to everybody for joining us today. Episode 54. This is the show that intersects old media versus new media. We interview luminaries in the world of broadcast, everyone from ex-DJs to, or current DJs to independent radio station owners, salespeople, marketing people, and of course, YouTube creators, content creators, podcasters, and everything in between. And I am joined by Mark Giuliani. Good to see you.
Good to see you guys. It's going to be a great show. I'm looking forward to talking to Oliver about mimoLive and hearing all the things that it does.
Well, I appreciate that, Mark. And other than the fact we're 1 hour later than we normally are because of the daylight savings time, the clocks have all been adjusted accordingly. And as you just said, we have a very distinguished guest on here, the gentleman from Germany who manages to create the software that we use to switch this program. Ladies and gentlemen, Oliver Breidenbach. Here he is, live and in person, coming to us from the Idelson Studio Complex in Monterey. Hello, Oliver.
Hi, thanks for having me.
We're glad to have you here. Now,
this is exciting, and I hope we have a lot of fun.
How long are you visiting the U.S. for? Are you allowed to stay as long as you want?
No, yeah. As you know, I'm traveling on ESTA, and I think the maximum stay is 90 days, and I'm not going to max that out. So,
well, we're gonna vote that we get to stay more. All right, we just had a little bit of a burp, and I'm sorry. I'm not going to blame the mimoLive, but Alex, you had a whole week to get it together, and we didn't have our alpha channel. Explain what happened, because I'm sure you have a theory of why our little transition didn't go with me in the center of the thing there, and then we'll go into all the good
honestly,
things.
no idea because it worked last week. I have no clue. So we're gonna have to fix that.
All right, so it's you got Oliver here who invented the software you're using to run the show. I figured that maybe we could work out the problem here live on the program, just to say, hey, when you have the inventor and the head developer, anything is possible.
Don't know what mimoLive is or what it does. What exactly is it, and why do people need it?
That is a very good question that we are still figuring out 10 years after or 15 years after we started it. So the idea, so it came about because it was a long-time dream of me and my brother to be able to have your own TV studio in your living room. So that's basically what it is. It's basically a TV studio in your living room, and So we were not content with having just 3 cameras and little buttons with like what you have with a hardware switcher with the ATEM things, which weren't around back then. So we decided that software switching or software video production, live video production, is actually much better. And you have to think about mimoLive not as a software version of a switcher. It's more like a Photoshop that creates 50 frames per second instead of just 1 frame. So it has a lot of video image processing power. All the graphics are basically animations that are, as you know, are 50 frames per second. And so composing everything together in 50 frames per second is what mimoLive does.
And
Interesting that say, oh, go ahead, Mitch.
I was just going to say, to keep it into perspective and giving the old guy's point of view, in my day, we had to have a Grass Valley switcher and frame synchronizers and time-based correctors and all. We used to have maybe millions of dollars worth of equipment to do what a studio does. And now you're doing it on an M1 Mac in our particular case, or an M2 Mac. That is an amazing feat to completely turn that into a virtual abstract layer. And it also requires a very deep understanding of the core applications within Mac. In other words, you have to understand how Apple demands that video is handled. I guess the Metal is the new abstract layer that Apple uses. But you're deep into the code of what makes Apple Apple. How did you figure all that out?
It's actually not that hard. It's the Apple platform. We like the Apple platform. We've been developing for the Mac ever since like the mid-90s. And it's a really well-designed API. So one thing that was funny, or is still funny, is like you go in there and you say, I think there should be something like this, and you look into the documentation, and then the exact thing that you're thinking should be there is there. So it is really a really well-designed API. So it's not that hard to do it. It's just takes a lot of practice, and of course, video production isn't easy. So along the way, there's lots of stuff to learn. But it's doable.
Yep. Alex, you had a question?
When you're working with a hardware-based camera switcher, and let me just provide a little context. I know a lot of people that watch this show and listen to it are technical and maybe have done some level of production. But when you're working with camera equipment, you're trying to do these types of shows. If you're used to using a hardware switcher, I think it's when your head is stuck in that workflow, when you switch to something like mimoLive, it works very, very differently. And I remember that was one of the obstacles that I had to overcome, is to kind of untangle your mind from these paradigms that you're used to. And I think your analogy to Photoshop is actually really, really brilliant, because that really explains kind of even the layout where you're dealing with layers, and it's not so much you're not restricted to the traditional layout of a switcher where you have a preview bus and a program bus and you're cutting between stuff. It's really more of a compositing engine. You are taking pieces and compositing things together and creating something new out of it, and the capabilities and what's possible are much greater than what you would be able to do on a piece of hardware switcher, which is the switcher does what it is designed to do and nothing beyond that, right?
A couple of examples where I think software is superior to hardware. For example, mimoLive is not limited to any video resolution, so you can go 15 pixels high but 4,712 pixels wide if you need to. And I've actually done a couple of nice hacks where John bought these devices that require some images or videos to be in a specific format, and converting anything to that, just drag in the video into mimoLive, set the mimoLive document resolution to that specific output and hit record, and I have a converted video. And likewise, you can use cameras with 4K and 1080p and, sideways up and whatever, and just mix them together. And you can use devices that have 30 frames per second, 60 frames per second, 25 frames per second, all into one. You don't have to convert anything before you put it into mimoLive. It's all being converted on the fly. And that gives you a lot less, a lot more flexible thing, and you can really reduce the amount of equipment you need, and so on and so forth. So and everything is. We like to say that everything is graphics, right? So even there's no difference between using a still image, a video, or a live video in mimoLive. So everywhere that you can put a graphic, you can also put a live video, or you could, put a pre-recorded video. So that's one of the things. And don't get me started on all the alpha channel things. It's like, I don't need a Kia. I can just use a PNG with transparency, or
Is all the Oliver, is all the video progressive? It's not, you're not dealing with interlace or field dominance and things like that?
You convert it to progressive when you do that, so there's also that going on. And we can send out like P60 to a Blackmagic device, and it can convert it to I30, for example. But internally we are everything is progressive. Everything is ARGB color space. We're gonna update that maybe in the not too distant future. We're gonna update that to P3. So we've got HDRs, 10 bits video, and everything that goes into mimoLive is automatically converted to that. Everything that goes out of mimoLive is all automatically converted to whatever needs to go out. So if you have YUV output over NDI, for example, which we did for a company in Seattle, and actually to work with high vision devices that only can take YUV NDI signals, there's a conversion there, and that's it. No device needed, no external conversion needed. Everything's in the application.
So who would be using mimoLive? Who would benefit the most from having this capability? Because it seems to me that there's no limit to the high end utilization versus a low end where you've got an ATEM mini and a couple of buttons from your Stream Deck. It seems to me that Mimo could do that job just as easily as the big stuff.
The sweet spot is like things like this podcast, right, where you're virtually producing the podcast in Zoom, and there's no really this is like the perfect example. How would you put that together in hardware, right, using an ATEM switcher? It's almost impossible. And
can you explain to people what is the difference between just using the normal Zoom app and the Zoom experience inside of mimoLive? What's the advantage?
Well, mimoLive has this concept of sources, right? So it's every camera is a source, every video is a source, every graphics is a source. And if you join a Zoom call with mimoLive, also every participant becomes a source. So we get ISO video and ISO audio feeds from everyone, and you can just treat them as if they were cameras with microphones in front of them. So for all the switching NOPs, what do they call it? Super sources. We call them hyper sources. So, and all that kind of stuff. Even the ISO recording of that can be done in mimoLive easily. So yes, the virtual production is certainly something that's a sweet spot. Other than that, education, we're giving schools the power of a $20 million OB van at the price of $700 a year. plus a Mac Mini M4 and maybe a little bit more hardware required to get the camera sources in. But so that's a sweet spot. And other than that, we have users all over the from lots of government, sports clubs, live production companies, events production companies, and so on and so forth. Everyone basically who can make the switch in their mind from the old, I call that the punch card model of live video production, where you have a device for everything, and you put them together with cables to something that's much more lightweight and more powerful at the same time. Everyone can benefit from this. So there's almost no problem we can't throw mimoLive at in live production. I haven't come across any yet. And by
the way, I don't take it personally. You called it punch card because just to do this little lower third thing used to require a separate device called a Chiron, and now that's all part of what's going on in Mimo. So sorry to interrupt.
No, yeah, I mean, I came up with the punch card model of live production or video production when I visited the Computer History Museum here in Silicon Valley, where they actually had put up an old computer system with uses punch cards, right? And there's like a punch card. There's a machine to duplicate the punch cards, so you can, and there's a machine to add the punch cards, and there's a machine to sort the punch cards, and there's a machine to do this and that and this. And that's basically what video production is. You have a switcher, you have a Chiron, you have a tape recorder, you have an encoder, you have a big mess of things, and I like it to be more simple. I like to remove all of that stuff, put in one computer, and that's it.
And speaking of computers, will it work easily with an M1 Mac all the way up to the new M4? It doesn't.
Been doing it for almost 15 years, so you can actually do it on a PowerPC Mac back in the days.
Wow.
It's I mean, today with an M4, or let's with an M4 you could probably do something like 20 full HD sources, right? And we have customers doing like that amount of sources, and you can stream to like 5-6 platforms at the same time and still join a Zoom meeting and also play it into the Zoom meeting. So
is your
software
lot of multi-threaded so that it can take advantage of multi-core devices?
Of course. M3 Ultra Mac Studio, there's like, 32 cores. If we would only use one of those, then we wouldn't get any different performance than taking a Mac Mini M1, because that's the single core performance is a lot better, but it's not that much better.
Apple just announced a new M3 and M4. The M3 is actually more powerful because it has 32 cores in it. It's got an outrageous speed. Hasn't been released quite yet, but you can order them. But the M3 and the M4 Mac Studio is the fastest Mac ever, which will run circles around anything else that which is the bane of our existence. When we buy we save up, and I think Alex, you just bought an M4 Mac. It's now obsolete. They've got something else out there. For $2,000, you can have a multi-core. Right.
mimoLive, what you can do with this is easily worth a couple of million hardware, so it's don't throw away the Mac Mini M4 that you bought last week yet. I mean, just because there's a Mac Studio now with an M3 Ultra. I mean, there's use cases where the more sources and the higher resolution, if you want to go 4K and use like 10 cameras or whatever, then you definitely need the M3 Ultra thing, but the M4 Mac Mini is doing a fine job for things like this, where we have 3 people coming in through Zoom doing, a podcast and switching that and
Alex, what are we
and
on?
recording it.
On right now using a M4 base level Mac Mini with 16 gigs of RAM, and all our sources are 1080p. So we got 4 sources in here. Well, a few more than 4, but they're all live streaming, getting upscaled up to 4K. And so CPU usage right now on this computer is, and we're also recording ISO audio of every participant on the same computer in mimoLive. And right now CPU usage is 40%. So,
Oliver, is that good? 40%?
Yeah, absolutely.
You don't know these days. Can't tell.
Thing about the way you're describing things too, Mimo, is, and one of the things that for me has been super liberating is abstracting the ideas of a concept switcher like out into these components here, that we're basically Mimo is becoming like a modular system that you can really, the limitations are the hardware, obviously the underlying hardware, but you can really build any type of production that you want. And I love the fact that there are ISO audio and video sources here. So if I get someone like Mitch yelling at me, I can just turn his volume all the way down, then nobody will hear him. That's really liberating.
Yeah, right.
I think the limit is actually more how much time do you spend to dive into what mimoLive can do. The hardware limit, of course, sets certain limitations of how many sources can you use and how many streams can you do and so on and so forth, but it doesn't put a limitation on the conceptual stuff you could do. So automation, all that kind of thing, making it easy. We have this partner company who makes what's called the one-button studio. So the idea is you set up a system like that in a room, and you walk in, and there's just a control panel with 6 buttons, that allows you to start the recording, stop the recording, switch, 3 types of layouts with your slideshow, without your slideshow, and that kind of thing. And that's it. And everything, the system turns on when the camera detects your face. So it's using camera detection in mimoLive to turn on the lights and that kind of thing when it detects someone going into the space and looking at the camera. And that's all done in mimoLive. So that's not something that needs to be, another box that needs to go in there. It's like, yeah.
That's great. Oliver, thanks again for being on the show. And just to get some context here, mimoLive is a piece of software which runs the entire content of this program. I don't profess to know it. Alex is the expert on it, but we do have a number of our listeners out there asking questions. And for that, we want to go over to Mark. Mark, what do folks want to know about mimoLive and what we do?
Well, we have a number of questions here for Oliver. The first one is, what is the derivation of the name mimoLive?
Oh, I don't know if I think you mean where does it come from, or what does it mean?
Yes.
It's like, as I said before, it's like it stands for multi-in, multi-out live video engine. So it's an acronym. We did that for trademark purposes. And how did it come about? The product was was called Boinx TV before, and over the years that we got feedback that the name, some people found issue with the name, and so we had to rebrand it. And we just sat down and have collected, like, in the team, a few dozen ideas and boiled it down to mimoLive, and in a process where everyone got to strike out the ones that he didn't like the least, and so we were left with mimoLive. That's how it came about.
Okay, great. We have another question here from Hershey Treveda in Daytona Beach. Do you feel that the Sennheiser Profile wireless system is adequate enough to get some recordings away from the desk? Or perhaps, do you feel that there are other products that are much better with quality and give you better output? I think this is actually directed toward Alexander.
Sorry, I was totally taken off guard by that. Can you repeat
You're
that, Mark?
busy
Sorry.
pushing
Yeah,
buttons,
sure.
right?
I'm not. I was not listening.
Okay, so sorry about that. I should have said that at the beginning. But do you feel the Sennheiser Profile wireless system is adequate enough to get some recordings away from the desk? Or perhaps, do you feel that there are other products that are much better with quality and give you better output again?
Yeah, Hershey, I haven't actually tested that new Profile wireless system. I believe it's a 2.4 gigahertz wireless transmitter receiver system. So it's not what I would call a professional wireless system. Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think it does onboard recording either. So, these types of products are really targeted to the content creator market. So we're talking about, and in this space, we're talking sub $1,000 wireless. That's in the realm of the Rode Wireless Goes and the DJI wireless clip-on transmitter systems there. So they're really not designed for mission-critical work. I would say, for me, the best option right now, if you're going to get something at this level that is 2.4 gigahertz, get the Rode system because it does onboard recording. I really like the Rode Wireless Pro because it actually has some additional professional features, like it's got the 32-bit float recording. It also has the time code option as well, so you can jam time code into your camera. So if you're doing multi-camera stuff, I'd say the Wireless Pro system would be the way to go for a sub $1,000 wireless. Anything that doesn't record on board, that's 2.4. I mean, man, you think about what is on the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. You're competing with Wi-Fi. You're competing with Bluetooth, which a lot of people don't even realize that it's operating in that frequency spectrum. So it is a very competitive space in that market. It's hard to get wireless working in that space.
Yeah, and also be careful, Hershey, with a 2.4 gigahertz anything. You have to be close. You can't be 50, 60 feet away from it. You have to be in tight and resist the temptation of putting any transmitter that's running at 2.4 on your back of your belt, because then it's got to go through your body. The giant ugly bag of water will attenuate that signal substantially. But everything Alex just said is true. You can get by with semi-pro stuff, but that is not a professional setup. Mark, got any more questions?
Okay, here we are. Let's see. Peter Belbin has a question for Oliver, and it is mimoLive something that can deliver low latency IMAG for confidence monitoring?
We have done it, and I've found that a lot of people have the very strong opinions about what latency is acceptable for this kind of stuff and what isn't. And I have a very high tolerance level for the latency in this case. But if you are using mimoLive and you play out through an HDMI output on your Mac, the delay from the play out to the display or the video output is very, very, very low. So if you run if you do a SDI playout through a Blackmagic device, then the latency is very low. But we also have used NDI, which adds some latency to the so you have some bigger latency from the camera to the screen. We have used that, and I mean, it worked quite okay. I mean, it's like, you have to ask yourself what's the tolerance level you have. Got it.
And Oliver, do you find it useful to have users like us here at the Last Angry DJ to provide any hopefully useful feedback to you? As you continually develop this product, where do you find you get the best feedback?
Yeah, the best feedback is users. I mean, it's like, actually, I like to see what people, the big bandwidth of things people do. We have, customers who run the jumbotrons at football stadiums with mimoLive, and we have users doing podcasts, and we have schools running their morning announcements with mimoLive, and it's always fun to see what they're doing, and of course all the feedback they provide and what they would like to see in the application. This is what drives development in our company, is basically the user feedback. So we are taking this product wherever our customers want it to be or need it to be, and of course we think about, is this does that make sense or whatever. So we don't implement every feature requests, but feature requests are the major source of things. And then, of course, we use it. We put on different things all the time, just to see how well it performs in real world situations, and then that's where we get the inspiration for real innovation, where we are like, we want, for example. mimoLive can now use something called background removal, which is a machine learning based way to remove your background, so you don't need a green screen, and that came basically from seeing how schools struggled, setting up a green screen, and it really didn't, the results they were getting weren't really so important to them. So it's easier to use the machine learning based background removal. It's good enough for many use cases, and it's just no pain to set up, because you don't have to set up anything. You just turn it on, right?
Yeah, that's a very interesting observation from you, because as somebody used to make their living out of creating green screens and fixing problems with them, it's always at best a tricky scenario. There is no one-click green screen that will work. And I think that I'll bring the subject up since it's my fear. AI should be getting involved in this real soon. When are you going to incorporate AI type of technology or algorithms in mimoLive? Is that something you look forward to?
It's already in there. It's already in there. As I said,
Wow.
One example is the background removal thing. We're going to be adding a lot more video processing that's been done by AI in the future. But one thing that's already in mimoLive is that almost no new code since the last 2 years hasn't been created by AI. So it's like the whole engineering process has moved to, we tell the AI what to do, and we of course we have to double check what it's doing, but it's more or less, telling the AI, we need this and that, and then it comes up with the programming code, and then we use that, and so that increases the productivity of the engineers tenfold, right? And we have things like, we try to create a bot that would help you make scripts for mimoLive. So the automation scripts, there's actually an AI bot that you can say, I want this automated, and it tries to come up with the script. That doesn't work so well yet. And interestingly, it came up with a lot of script things that we hadn't implemented. So it made up functionality that should be in mimoLive, and we actually added that in mimoLive, so that because the AI said, it would be a good idea to have that.
Good. Alex, using mimoLive for how long here on the Last Angry DJ?
I've lost track, but we've been using I want to say the first 3 months, I think we were just screen scraping Zoom, which looked awful, and I can't even look at those. It's so bad. I can't look at those early episodes. So, but yeah, it's been a while now that we've been. So
mimoLive incorporates what we used to call, or still call, Zoom ISO. In other words, we have access to the highest quality Zoom without the debris.
Exactly. Well, it's more than that because mimoLive is using the Zoom SDK, right? So we're essentially using the SDK, for those that don't know, software developer kit, right? So we're effectively using the API to pull in, and Oliver can talk about this more, but we're basically getting the direct feeds from Zoom. So minus the screen debris. Now, the consequence of doing this that I've noticed going from just screen scraping is that the picture quality has actually increased. The color quality is better. The frame rate seems smoother. And I know I'm not the only one that's made this observation. Other people have noticed. People on this show, our viewers, have noticed the quality has increased dramatically doing this. I know people on office hours have noticed as well. So it is vastly superior. And I'll let Oliver, if you want to jump in, you can talk a little bit more about that Zoom integration. What was that like, building that?
Well, we had a lot of support from Zoom, so it was quite smooth sailing compared to some other things we've done. So still, it is a lot of work to keep up because they are updating the SDK. I mean, the guys from Zoom, Andy Caluccio, his team is doing a fantastic job of driving the innovation in the SDK forward. And it's hard to keep up with all the stuff they're doing, but they also do a good job at making it stable, so we don't have to update because just because things break, that doesn't happen usually. So it's overall a very pleasant experience, and it's very, very powerful.
And we got some more questions coming in. Let's jump in there and take a look. Mark, can you update us a little bit? And we can't hear you, sir.
Brediverse has a question from Oliver. It is a help system or documentation planned for the Mimo Composer product?
Yeah, it is planned, but right now it's not the top priority. The top priority is to get it working so that we can replace the old Apple technology that's currently in mimoLive with this new thing, and that's the top priority. We will add documentation later on. But it's so close to a Quartz Composer that if you look for the Quartz Composer tutorials, they will help you get started with Mimo Composer as well.
Next question. And
Our next question is from Hershey. Oliver, it's great to have you on, sir. Have you come across anybody with accessibility needs with the product yet? If so, what would you describe the pathway for someone that needs accessibility with your product?
So accessibility is a wide area. So there's people who who need help seeing things, some contrast, bigger text, something like that. Then there's people who don't see at all. There's people who can't hear. There's people who can't move, and so on and so forth. So it's really a wide area. So fortunately, a lot of accessibility technologies that are built in macOS are so abstract to the application that we don't actually have to do anything special to support them. But however, of course, we don't have any done any testing to figure out how well this works. So if you have any issues with accessibility that you know about, that you would want us to address, then just please reach out to the forums at forum.boinx.com and just let us know.
Mark, do you have any other questions?
We do. Peter Belbin has a question. I got to look over to another screen to read it. Bear with me a second here. It is, does mimoLive have the ability to detect when portions of a video match something captured previously and automate switching to adverse when content no longer matches the expected criteria?
That is a very difficult question, because is that if
Let me-
do we
yeah.
can we detect when a camera goes black, or can we detect when someone on the camera shows the finger, or what what is the exact thing you need to automatically detect? We have an auto switcher built in, for example, that can automatically switch based on who's talking into the microphone. So that is one thing we can do. And there's actually I don't know if it ships with mimoLive, but it will soon ship with mimoLive. Perhaps is actually a layer that can that can detect when something changes in the image, or when more than 30% or something it changes in the image and can trigger something. That we built that because we built a video trap for a bunch of birds that and we wanted to see when they were in their nest, and so we looked at the nest, and when the video changed a lot, enough, then we could start the recording, so we wouldn't have a lot of recording without anything moving in the thing. So we have some of that in mimoLive, and if you need it, reach out to the forums or the support formula for the support form, and we'll get in touch.
And the last question that's in there for now?
The last question that's in there for now is for Mitch, and it's from Hershey in Daytona Beach. It says, compared to your Sony ZV-E10 Mark I and your Sony FX3, what would be your thoughts or recommendations to anyone in the video world, or maybe even YouTube, that may consider that camera? Do you feel that the FX3 has accessibility that would make it easy?
It's interesting, especially when I was on office hours, we had a lot of discussions about what was the perfect device to use for the particular application. And we tended to scrape the high end for everything. I still think that the best camera, in my opinion, that has image quality is this Sony FX3. And the main reason for it, in my opinion, is that it has that wonderful autofocus that works so well. You can take just about anything and put it in there. And of course, it'll never do it when I try to see how it grabs that autofocus so quick, and then boom, it's gone. And I'm gone, and now I'm back into it. It's not working great. It's always that way when you try to do a demo. And comparing it to the ZV-E10, which is my little brother, it's not that huge a difference. Not huge a difference between. In fact, a lot of the cameras you're seeing on the show, there's not a gigantic difference from one to the other. Things that semi-professionals can tell. You can see how sharp it is, or whether the bokeh looks nice with the particular lens that we're using. There's an awful lot of things, Hershey. But I think that if you're thinking about an FX3 as the top-end camera, I'd go with an FX30, which has come out since the FX3 was released by Sony. So it's about half the price. And honestly, I can't really see the difference in quality, particularly on a Zoom call where you're comparing apples with apples and apples and oranges. So it's up to you to decide what you like. Alex's image looks every bit as good as mine. And Alex, you have a Canon, right? You're using a Canon?
No, I actually am using an older Panasonic Lumix. This is a GH5S, and it's a micro four thirds, so a considerably smaller sensor than the one you have, Mitch.
Yeah, it's not a full sensor. So the point is, Hershey, you don't need to have top-end stuff to make a 1080 Zoom call with somebody and put it on a podcast. I do, on the other hand, sort of turn my nose up to people that have a less than perfect camera in a old iPhone or an old iBook or something, especially the camera technique where you're looking up somebody's nose and you're seeing how many nose hairs they have. I'm going to throw this back to Oliver and say, is there anything that you can do within Mimo that would improve the quality of the image that it's receiving? Something that smooths the skin out, does a little bit of sharpening, anything like that? Do you provide that capability?
No, we don't have that kind of filtering in there yet, but that's part of macOS. So if you have a camera that goes through macOS, you can, like your webcam or something like that, you can turn that on actually before it reaches mimoLive. So there's some tricks we can do. And of course, we can. I mean, we in mimoLive there's multiple ways, like making color corrections and things like that can help you make a better image. But that is not a major focus of mimoLive yet.
Yeah, the position we're at right now, I think in terms of the quality, I've got as good a camera as I could possibly use, and it's overkill, no doubt about it. But Alex has gotten to the point where he knows how to tweak and encode to go to zoom, where the image, once you put it on a big screen, like I watched last week's show on a big screen downstairs, and it isn't 4K, but it sure looked like 4K. Alex, how do you do that?
Yeah, so it's interesting what we've learned recently over the last few months, and I learned this through some of the stuff through that Office Hours Global is doing, and also we had, and I apologize, I forgot his name, the guy that works at YouTube, actually confirmed this, that if you send YouTube, if you send out to your live stream anything more than 1080p resolution, so let's say if you're encoding using RTMP, that protocol, if you're doing 1440p and higher, you actually get put into a different encoding pipeline that is much higher quality, which has much better compression, which translates to better image quality. And so the image is going to look sharper, and also the color quality is going to be better. I also learned that if you send YouTube, and it doesn't have to be 4K, but if you use anything other than the RTMP protocol, like any of the newer protocols like SRT, HLG, you will also be put into this higher quality pipeline that, you know, YouTube considers it like you really care about your show, you're putting in extra effort. So they treat you differently if you send more resolution, and thus your show ends up looking better. And our show looks significantly better than it did before when I was streaming it out at 1080p.
Yeah, I was going to say that, as you know, I'm a little, biased here, but as shows go, ours looks pretty darn good. In fact, I think it looks better than Joe Rogan's show. But that's just me, and that's because I've got the best tech and producer, Alex Knight, on the show, and we're lucky enough to be incorporated Oliver Breidenbach's great Boinx Software, mimoLive. We have the best of both worlds. We've got great sound, great video, great quality. We're still working out some of the bugs, and most of their operator related, to be able to do little things like put the lower third in and do an alpha channel wipe. We're working on that. But, we like to keep it real here on the show, so we don't mind exposing if we have a little of a glitch or a little bit of a problem. One thing to point out, Alex is the producer and he's a co-host of the show, but he's also switching the program, which is definitely a left-right brain thing. I don't know how you deal with it, Alex. It's very hard, but without mimoLive, it would be 10 times harder, right?
It would be a lot harder. And yeah, you're right. I do make mistakes from time to time. It's really hard to do both. And that's one of the things, I mean, we can also talk about this too and get your opinion, Oliver, but I would love to do a little more automation. I think what I need on the show as a technical director, as somebody who's straddling the line between those two different roles, is to have some way to cut to, say, active speaker, where it will automatically switch between everybody that's actively speaking and also put their lower thirds. And I would use that sparingly. So sometimes I actually need to focus on something that's happening, say, in the live chat, or, someone's saying something, and so that's a distraction, and I can't really push buttons at the same time as typing on the keyboard. So I think I need some kind of macro where I can just put it into autopilot mode and let it do its thing while I'm working through a problem, and then go back to manual mode. Like, what do you think about that type of workflow?
Totally easy to set up.
Look at that. It's possible.
It's possible.
Nice.
Yeah,
we'll work on that for sure. Yeah, it's something. Well, this is the show. We always talk about this live because we're not shy about it. Mitch always says keeping it real, but this show is an iteration. We're always working through problems. We're always looking at ways of how do we make this better? How do we create efficiencies? How do I make my job easier? How do we make this show look better? All that kind of stuff. Any kind of polish that we can apply to make this show work and look better. So it's always a work in progress, and I'm not shy about that. Go ahead,
So
Mark.
regarding the automation, Peter has a clarification to his question, and it regards the automation of advertisements. So his example is when you're in a football game and the scoreboard is showing, is there a way to, when the scoreboard comes down from that shot, to automatically insert the advertisements?
Um, yeah, I mean, based on the what you switch to, or I mean, if you press I mean, if you set it up with the remote control surface, you can have a button that says, cut away from the scoreboard and start the advertisements. Or is it? Do you want to actually replace the image that's on the scoreboard with an advertisement? That's also possible, although not automatically. But there's a layer that lets you map stuff onto other things. So I could map, something onto the cubes here in the background, and make it look as if it's on that, on that surface. There's lots of things. I think I need to get more, maybe example video or something like that shows what you want to do. But yeah, feel free to reach out in the forums and send that example video, and we'll talk through it.
And I think in the radio world, there's a similar system where you have an automation system that has the clock, and then you have, yeah, I don't know about the music world, but in the news talk world, you'll have an intro, then you'll go to news and such. All that stuff's automated, and then it'll stop automatically when it's time for the announcer to take over and start the show. And then you could do things like hard breaks, where at the bottom of the hour, if you have news coming in, it'll just go right into that automatically, and the announcer has to watch the clock because it's going to break out automatically.
Yeah, that's totally possible with the automation layers. Is make something happen at a certain time. Yeah, that's totally possible.
And I was saying stadiums are complicated beasts, just like Times Square, New York City. Is that the standard 1080, 4K, whatever size image that you have? You may have a stadium that has this little banner that wraps around the entire stadium. The needs of video and resolution and sizes has changed quite drastically because they're painting, they're decorating these stadiums and studios and places with all kinds of different sizes. The size no longer is so set in stone. It's not like 4:3 and 16:9, et cetera, et cetera. There's all kinds of different sizes, and it seems like you're able to handle that.
Yeah, we are absolutely. One of the issues there is always still that the interfaces to those things assume that you can't send them like the correct resolution. So they usually have like a 1080p feed that you can send them, and then they have like a scaler and that all kind of crap. That is strictly speaking not necessary. But how do you? That's one of the challenges in that regard, is then the interface between the display and the computer, and make it so that we can actually send the crooked formats to that scoreboard.
Oliver, what do you think is next for podcasting? I mean, you're in software, so it doesn't require these individual bespoke devices like you were saying earlier, a Chiron, a switcher, an encoder, a tape machine, etc. It seems to me that you can react quickly to any trend or request that comes along, including what we were just talking about, an unusual shape like a banner around a stadium. What's next? What's the next big thing that's coming along in the podcast or video business?
I don't know, but exactly, the thing you're doing is like where people, take the production into the cloud and into the virtual realm is certainly a big trend, I would say. And whatever whatever they come up with is fine with us. We will be able to quickly change or even help make it happen.
And where is Boinx's stance or mimoLive stance on production in the cloud? And I'm glad you brought that up, because obviously some people are using mimoLive. They've installed it on a server somewhere, and they're using Splashtop or some other solution to cut a show. But where does mimoLive fit into the cloud production workflow in a way?
mimoLive itself needs a Mac to run on. There is no there is no technology that gives you sort of like a virtual Mac in the cloud somewhere. Also, the big challenge is to send the video signals to the cloud. So I think there is a use case for cloud production, but it's not used. You won't use it for everything, right? If you have a studio with cameras there, why not have why would you try to send the 4K signals to the cloud and produce in the cloud if you can have on-premise relatively cheap a Mac Mini M4 with all the power that you need and all the bandwidth you need, and no one sharing your internet, your network connection, your bandwidth to the computer, and don't face all that things that happen there. If you stream to YouTube, you will be familiar with this. Sometimes YouTube just can't keep up with everything that's been sent to it or downloaded, or the next network node in the way between you and YouTube is overloaded, and then you get into all kinds of issues. And that's the way of that's the nature of cloud production. So I think there's a place for cloud production, but it shouldn't be like it's certainly not the one size fits all solution. And I think in video production or in podcast production or live production, there is no one size fits all solution. Everything needs to be tailor-made, tailored to the use case, and that's another strength of the software, is that when those requirements change, you don't have to throw away like $500,000 worth of equipment. You can just open a new document and make your video portrait video, so and stream to TikTok if you need to, and that's the beauty of software, is that the versatility and adaptability to new challenges.
Yeah, I think that's a pragmatic approach to it for sure. I mean, there's no sense because I thought about this too. Some people ask me, don't you want to run mimoLive? You could put it in the cloud on a much more power. You could rent a Mac. In a Mac Stadium, and you could have it in the cloud. But I think you're right. I think where it makes sense to do remote production, you should do it, and where it makes sense to have local sources, you should also do that. And obviously, I mean, in my setup too, I've got a hybrid stuff. I've got local cameras going in. I've got lots of local audio sources, and obviously, where I need remote production, I use it. And I think that makes perfect sense to me. And also, there's less failure. Why not use the local source if I have it there in the studio?
We've been talking a lot about video. Why don't we talk about the audio capabilities in mimoLive? Anybody using it for audio only podcast?
I don't think that that makes a lot of sense. Our focus clearly is on video with audio and not just audio. ISO recording, so you could do a live show like this and still have ISO recording of the audio, and I think that's exactly what Alexander's doing. And then you can use the audio to mix your audio show later if you want to do that, and have a live stream of how the podcast is produced, and then you can go and edit it. And make it an audio-only podcast, and add stuff that maybe needs to be there because people can't see what's happening on screen. Like, I don't know, voiceover for how he's holding up this and that, maybe, if that happens. audio-only podcasting isn't really the focus of mimoLive production. There's other, tools that you can use for that, especially if you don't want to be live streaming it somewhere.
Well, I just think it's important to note that Alex does a lot of behind-the-scenes adjustments, like adjusting the relative volume for the participants. Can you EQ? Can you process? Can you limit? Is there any other DSP-related functionality in mimoLive for the audio? I don't know. I asked the questions.
Yeah, there is a little bit of that. You can actually, you can adjust the relative volume of your sources to each other. You can there's a compressor, a dynamics compressor that you can turn on. But it really isn't the biggest focus. And the funny thing is, we actually have in the engine, we already have the capability of adding audio units, which is like the plugin modules on the Mac side for audio processing. So that would give you an equalizer, that would give you, everything you want. And it's already in mimoLive, but we don't have a user interface for it. So we have built it in about 10 years ago. We built it in, but we didn't add a user interface because that's so complex. The user interface for that is really. Look at things like what's the Apple app that does audio.
Logic.
Logic. Look at the what's the one from Adobe. Audition, yeah, that's a whole new kind of user interface. But we might be able to just do some simple thing and add that so that people can,
And I will say on the note of
or something like
of audio.
One thing I recently, one really interesting thing I recently discovered is that Apple has added this voice isolation feature to macOS. So you can now turn on voice isolation on all the audio that goes into mimoLive. So if you're doing an audio podcast like this, the voice isolation feature actually removes all the background noise and makes you sound really good.
Some are good at that. Some are bad. Some add more crap that comes along with it. The only one I've ever heard that I really liked is noise assist, and that's built into sound devices, the various product line that they have. But please, whatever you do, this is my pet peeve. Don't add virtual backgrounds the way that Zoom does, because it looks like people have Jell-O floating around their body. Anything but virtual backgrounds, unless you got it 100%. Please don't add that in there. I wouldn't like to see it.
Well, you can add virtual backgrounds if you want to, but it's not like we have. It's different from what they do in Zoom or Teams or whatever. So we don't give you a library of backgrounds that but you can remove your background.
What
and put
is
something
it
else
with
there.
People that somehow are too ashamed of what they have behind them, or they have to fake people like they're sitting on the back of a boat, or in Miami Beach or some other exotic location? What is that? That's just crazy, and it's so obvious to me when I see it. I say, "What, are you ashamed of your bookcase, or what you have hanging on the back wall, that picture or that particular book?" I don't know. It's just a thing.
I use it usually when I travel and I'm in a hotel room and I don't want the people to see
you're in a
the
hotel
messy bed
room
in the background.
So if you go to the Ritz-Carlton, have a nice place to do it too. Mark, do we have any other questions before we wrap up the show here?
We do. So we have Oliver regarding audio. You talked a lot about it, but we have one question here from Hershey that he's asking about the specs of the audio. For instance, what kinds of sources can it accept, and in terms of bit rates and kilohertz and things of that nature?
Again, it can accept anything, and it will convert everything to what you set up in the mimoLive document. I would recommend on the audio side, just because there's some special things going on in the audio processing, to have everything the same, the same sample rate and format. But I mean, just as with video, mimoLive usually can convert it on the fly to whatever you have. So any file that you put in there, you can play, and any microphone or something you can have connected to any capture device, we can take any format.
Thanks for your questions, folks listening. Oliver, thanks for your answers. Thanks for the use of mimoLive. We're a proud user of it. Our show is powered by mimoLive. How do folks reach out and see what this is all about? Because it's Boinx Software, I believe. You have to go to Boinx to be able to see.
The best website is, of course, the mimoLive website, mimolive.com. There is now also a free evaluation license that puts a little watermark on your screen, but you're not time limited, so you can try it out as long as you want to. If you don't mind the watermark to be in your production, you can even use it for production, and it's totally free.
Well, we like to consider you to be a friend of show, and we'll always use it as long as you allow us to. We appreciate your participation. Alexander, how do people reach out to us to ask us questions or make comments or suggest future guests? You can't top people like Oliver. That's as good as it gets.
Absolutely. You can reach out to us on our Discord community, and you will see a QR code hovering over my left shoulder right there. If you put your camera on that will go into our Discord community, where you can talk to us before, after, during the show, and suggest future topics you want us to discuss. It's a fun place to hang out. And another thing you can do is also follow us on social media. We're at The Last Angry DJ pretty much everywhere on social media, all platforms. You can also send us email the old-fashioned way, and our email address is hello@thelastangrydj.com. You can find this show, this version of the show, as a podcast, audio-only podcast, on Apple Podcasts, Google, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, and all available podcast clients out there. Of course, that's the best way. Just subscribe to the show so you ensure that you get every new episode each and every week. We live stream at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sundays, if you prefer to watch us on camera as well. And of course, if you'd like to show your support for the show, there are multiple ways that you can contribute. One, you can just share it with a friend, let other people know that you like the show, and also you can vote with your dollars. You can go to patreon.com/The Last Angry DJ. That's patreon.com/The Last Angry DJ, and become a coffee supporter. That's what we call it, $2 a month, and we would greatly appreciate it. Back to you.
Thank you, Alex. And as of yet, there is no tariff associated with this program, and we hope to keep it that way. And I want to thank all the participants of the program, the people asking the questions, the folks watching. Don't forget, if you're watching on YouTube Live, smash that subscribe button. I know I say it too much, but it helps us. I want to see us go above 162 where we are today. Just one person do it, and it would make me very, very happy. Thanks go out to Mark for being here, to Laura Thompson for being our backup person on Mukana, the question person that juggles and wrangles all the questions that come in. It's always a challenge every time something new comes up. And of course, our special guest today, Oliver Breidenbach. Not only do we thank you for coming on the show, because you're very generous to do that, but you're just a very, very interesting person, and you have extraordinary software, which we're happy to use. So we thank you. And one last thanks out to John Edelson in Marina. Where is he? He's in
Monterey.
Marina del. Where's that?
Monterey.
Oh, he's in Monterey. That's it. He's out there in the west somewhere. And John, thank you for your use of your home and your studio. John is also a friend of the show. So we want to thank all of you for being here. We hope to see you again next week. Take care.